Okay. Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can still hear me. If not, definitely send a message in the chat box. Um, Webinar. Thank you for joining us. And I think that actually, yeah, here we go. No more sound when someone joins the call. Okay. I think we're good now. Okay. Thank you for joining the webinar, and good morning to everybody in North America, and good afternoon if you're joining from the UK. My name is Jean, and I'm the Product Development Manager at Altmetric. And what I'll be doing today is going through a reasonably quick presentation about Altmetrics in general, and what we've been working on in the institutional area about how to sort of best utilize Altmetrics. I can also give you a demo in a little bit about showing you all the new features of our institutional edition, which we've just launched very, very recently, actually. Today is our official launch date. So thank you again for joining us. Okay, so just to get started, let's take a look at the first definitions that we might want to consider whenever we're thinking about altmetrics. So, I mean, there are many different definitions of altmetrics anyways, but what we tend to look at altmetric.com is this. So we think about altmetrics as being new ways of measuring non-traditional forms of impact. And these are more alternative to only using citations rather than an alternative completely to traditional bibliometrics. Even though the alternative metrics name kind of suggests that it would be alternative completely. We really are looking for something a bit more complementary. So some of the uses that we can get out of altmetrics are to demonstrate impact, uptake, and usage of articles in ways that we wouldn't have necessarily been able to capture before with traditional bibliometrics. A byproduct of this also is now the ability to actually discover socially curated research. So any papers that are getting more attention, we can actually see them a lot more quickly than we could before. So this is a diagram we typically show to capture our perspectives of impact. I've divided it here into the academic sphere and the societal sphere. So in terms of academic impact, we're all very familiar with that. The journal impact factor kind of reigns supreme there. Citation counts are very, very important, and all of these comprise the traditional metrics. When you look at societal impact, it's far more nebulous. And there isn't really a standardized way to examine or capture societal impact right now, but at least at Altmetric, we take the approach of measuring things like mentions in news reports or mentions in policy documents, mentions in social media and blogs, and so on. And all of this, we hope, will go towards capturing, our version of the alternative metrics. And this is small a altmetrics, not capital A, as our company name is. So what we want to do then is think about everything in a holistic way. So we want to try and account for both academic and societal research impact. A little bit about Altmetric then. So Altmetric is a company that collects online attention surrounding scholarly articles. And we started everything up in about 2011. And since then, we've been collecting a lot of data. And actually, the volume of data is very, very high. Every day, we see approximately 15,000 news stories, blog posts, social media posts, and many other kinds of content. These comprise the mentions. And then over the course of a week, we'll see approximately 40,000 unique articles. Looks like there's a lot of chatter going on right now in the chat box. If anybody is still having trouble, hopefully they're sorting it out. Okay. So now a little bit about Altmetric's data. Every article that gets mentioned online, as far as we can tell, gets its own Altmetric details page. The details page is really the core of Altmetric. It's the central part of everything we do, and it shows you all the information that we collect. So it'll have three major components to it. One is the metrics part, which shows raw counts. And these are things like the number of tweeters or the number of blog posts, number of news stories, number of policy documents, that kind of thing. And then we have a score of attention, and this is known as the Altmetric score, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a bit. And finally, and most importantly, we have mentions. So these are the links to the actual content. And without the mentions, you really wouldn't have any context about what you're looking at. So with the raw data, you can actually see what makes up the numbers. So this is what a details page looks like. And there are several parts of the details pages that are of interest, and they're all flagged up in this diagram here. So number one indicates the area on the details page where there are different ways to sort of navigate through sources. So you'll see all the different sources for this particular article are listed. You know, there's Twitter attention, Facebook attention, news attention, blogs attention, so on. And we've got news selected here. And the number two area indicates that you can actually click through and read the news stories. So you can go to the website where the news story is hosted and read the whole thing and then decide for yourself what kind of attention that was. The area marked by number 3, that shows all of our metrics. So you'll see the raw counts under the words mentioned by, and what you see above that is the Altmetric donut, which is our very distinctive visualization, and you have the Altmetric score in the center. And the center score there, it isn't just a straight up sum of all the raw counts, as I'll explain in a bit. And all of it is supposed to be an estimate of the volume of attention, really, like how much attention this particular paper has received from all the areas that we track. So a little bit more about the score. We get a ton of questions about the score, and for good reason too. It's not a scientifically validated measure, so it has a lot of people scratching their heads. But hopefully what I explain here will give you an idea of how to use the score, how not to use the score, and even if you don't want to use the score, you don't have to, because we offer scoreless donuts as an option. If you want to include that on a page like a CV or even on a journal article, you don't have to use the score. It really is just something we show as an indicator that maybe this paper had a lot of attention for some reason or another. So there are 3 main aspects that influence the Altmetric score. And the first is volume. Volume is really intuitive. It simply means that the higher the score is, it means that the more people have mentioned it. And so even if a paper actually was retracted and a lot of people are talking about it being retracted, the score will likely be quite high, simply because there are a lot of mentions. The other 2 categories that influence the score are a bit more subtle. So with sources, what we've done is we actually assign a base amount for every source that we track. So a news mention will by default always be worth more than a tweet. And this is purely subjective on our part. It has to do with our impression of the reach of a particular source. So the New York Times will likely have a higher reach than one tweeter with 1 or 2 followers. So that is essentially the reasoning behind that. The authors applies a bit more of a nuance to that. So how often the author of each mention talks about articles actually influences the post's contribution to the Altmetric score in the end. If you think of news actually as an example, we sometimes also take into account things like circulation in terms of authors. So the New York Times will typically have a higher modifier to the base score compared to the Sydney Morning Herald, simply because of the readership and international reach. If you think about tweeters, that's an interesting case as well, because we actually apply a smaller modifier to tweets from a publisher, simply because the publisher will often just tweet their own papers, so they're biased towards one publisher. An author that's widely networked will maybe tweet about multiple publishers, not just Nature Publishing Group or Springer, and this diversity contributes to a higher modifier to their post's Altmetric score. So other than that, as I mentioned, we have the donut visualization that surrounds the score. And in case you didn't notice already, the colors are a legend. So light blue always means Twitter, Yellow always means blogs, red, news, and so on. We have a new purple stripe that you'll start to see in our donuts as well, and these refer to policy documents. So we're taking our first step into the gray literature, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. But essentially, the way that this visualization is meant to be used is something that can quickly tell you the diversity of sources that have mentioned a paper. So this is probably one of the most important slides of my presentation. It's just that the numbers, be it the metrics or the Altmetric score, none of these represent the quality of research. All we're talking about is attention here. The other thing is that the metrics don't indicate the quality of the researchers. So you can't use the number to actually say, well, this person has better research and are more robust researchers than someone else. So it doesn't mean that. The other thing is that the numbers don't tell the whole story, so what you really need to focus on is all the qualitative stuff. So the qualitative data are the raw mentions, and those are the things that you should focus on whenever you're looking at an Altmetric details page. So just a quick run through of our data sources, just to give you an idea of the diversity that we track. Most people will recognize that Altmetric was started off in tracking social media. So we've tried to track things like Twitter and Facebook and even stuff like Sina Weibo in China. We've also taken a stab at tracking a lot of mainstream news, mostly in the English language, and blogs as well, academic blogs. And on the researcher and institution side, we are looking at more academic sources like Mendeley, which is an online reference manager. And very recently, we added 2 peer review sites, open peer review sites, Publons and PubPeer. And probably the newest, well, it is definitely the newest source actually. Newest source and something we're quite proud of is the addition of policy documents. So with policy documents, we're starting to track several collection sources, and the first one that we've managed to do is NHS Evidence Search. That's the National Health Service in the UK, but we're definitely expanding the sources as well. So just to give you a little quick look at how we actually collect the attention, it'll give you an idea of sort of the process behind the software, and you'll understand exactly how we put together the details page. So the first thing we have to do is actually follow a list of sources. So we need to know, well, are we going to track Twitter? Are we going to track blogs? If so, which blogs? Which news sources? All of that. That's manual. So we manually determine what we want to track. And then we start with the automatic collection. So we'll search for links to papers specifically. So if you tweet a link to a paper, that's what we're looking for. And it can be a link to the PubMed version of the page, to the archive version. It could be to the publisher version. It doesn't really matter. We just pick up that link and try and identify it as being a paper. Once that's done, we collate that attention. And what we try to do there is disambiguate the mentioned articles. So if you've actually tweeted about a PubMed article and your friends tweeted about the journal version of that same article, we'll recognize the 2 sources of attention as being about one object. So it'll be about that one article. Finally, after collating all that attention, we display the data all together in an individual article details page, as you saw before. So now to sort of switch gears, we've done a lot of work with publishers, and before I go into the institutional stuff, it's useful to understand what we've done with publishers beforehand. So the first thing we've done is created a free bookmarklet. So maybe many of you have already seen the free bookmarklet and tried it out yourself. It's a very quick and easy way to get into Altmetric and to introduce Altmetric to any researchers that you work with. The second thing is the Altmetric badge offering. So there are free badges which have a limited complement of data, and then the paid badges which publishers actually pay for, and they can display the Altmetrics for a single journal article on the article page. The other product that publishers use is our API. So they can get all the raw data, display it any way they want, and give you a custom dashboard with all the metrics and all the numbers and the mentions if they so choose. the last thing is actually an app. And this app lets publishers browse and analyze through all of the Altmetrics data that we've collected to date. It's quite a powerful tool because they can compare their Altmetrics data with other publishers' data as well. And of course, all of these different products, they all link back into the details page. So even if you're viewing the details page as an editor or an author, you'll still see the same thing. And you've seen the badges probably in a couple of publishers. So with Cell Press, the example is actually kind of a small Altmetric badge. It has a little faint donut, but it isn't the donut itself, and it has the score. And for the Royal Society of Chemistry, they decided to put a metrics tab on their pages and actually have the donut and some information there. And then with Nature.com, they've chosen, actually interestingly, to put their badge next to the citations counts. And with the API, you might have seen Altmetric before in Scopus. So that was one custom app that was built for Scopus, and then you can access Altmetric data directly through any of your Scopus queries. And with the app, as I mentioned, it's a very comprehensive search through the entire Altmetric database, and also lets journal publishers compare performance for different journals, different publishers, and so on. And so that's all well and good. Why did we do this, though? Why did we work with publishers? Actually, the reasoning for it was to give a service for authors. And earlier this year, the results of a Wiley-run survey came out. They had trialed article-level metrics with altmetric.com, and interestingly, 65% of the people who responded to the survey felt that the metrics were useful. 77% agreed that Altmetrics enhanced the value of the journal article, and around 50% agreed that they were actually more likely to submit a paper to a journal that supports Altmetrics. So all really interesting findings that seem to suggest that Altmetrics are a useful author service and something that publishers want. But then the authors are, of course, in institutions, and we thought, well, we should work with the authors as well, the authors directly, as well as the university personnel, including librarians and research administrators. And so we identified 4 groups of people in institutions who might actually need Altmetrics data in some way. With librarians, we talked to them a lot, and we basically figured that actually they want to help their researchers track the attention, help them put together stuff like their impact, their citations, their H-index, and Altmetrics as well. And in addition, a lot of them wanted to add value to their institutional repositories and to really encourage the depositing of other items into that repository. With research administrators, we heard a lot about government mandates and funding, things like the REF, which is in the UK. Of course, also a shared need to monitor and report on uptake and impact of publications in departments, obviously with traditional bibliometrics, but maybe also with Altmetrics if they were helpful in some way. And then, of course, other groups in the university include even the communications team. Sometimes the alumni office kind of fits into that as well, and researchers who want to find indicators of impact for both maybe a CV or a funding application. So there were many different people in the university that we thought could benefit from using Altmetrics. So we gave them some free stuff. We started off with actually giving our entire publishing package, the badges, to institutional repositories for free. So they get essentially the exact same thing as a publisher does, with the donuts being on all the repository item pages and also customized article details pages for each of their items. We also provided free API keys for data research projects. So whenever researchers wanted to do any kind of science metrics kind of research, we provided the data and even data dumps if they required that. Of course, the bookmarklet was free, so a lot of people got a little bit of an introduction to Altmetrics that way. And the last thing we did was we gave our app, the Altmetric Explorer, to librarians for free. So we didn't create a custom app for them. We just gave them the exact same thing publishers had, and gave them to librarians. There were some free offerings, and of course there's some paid offerings. The paid offering that we have now is Altmetric for institutions. So what I'll show you in a bit is the app, and actually it's based on the Altmetric Explorer, and it's a site license for the entire institution, which actually also includes full API access for implementation into existing systems. But then there's the question, why did we build Altmetric for institutions? Why was there a need for this app? Well, what happened was, as I said, we gave the Altmetric Explorer to librarians for free. And actually, to date, we've provided over 1,000 free accounts. And if you still want one, you can just email us and get a free account. That is the original Altmetric Explorer, which has a lot of publisher-specific filters and search options. But you know what? It's free. So we had a lot of really positive feedback from the librarian users. This one says, I'm loving it. I have emergency medicine docs interested in it because they run a daily question roundup with residents. And like that, they can access hot topics via Altmetric. But, you know, in spite of all the nice, warm, fuzzy, happy, positive feedback, we also got a few other comments. And there was one comment that was kind of resoundingly the same. It was always, please let me see data on papers from a person or a department. So that's something we couldn't do actually before. We would be able to show you DOIs and with a lot of metadata scraped from journal publisher pages, but we wouldn't actually be able to associate them with a university, a person, a department, because we couldn't disambiguate all those details. So it was a bit of a problem, and we decided, okay, well, the solution is to create a different kind of way of structuring the data. So we first approached institutions for initial ideas of how we could actually solve this problem. How can we get your data and match it to our data? We collated a lot of feedback. You know, what did you like about the Altmetric Explorer? You know, what kinds of features are more useful to you? What's not useful to you at all? And then we built a working prototype based upon the Altmetric Explorer app. And finally, we enlisted a bunch of development partners, both in the UK and the US. And we essentially asked them loads and loads of questions. We bugged them via email, in person, and they fed us a lot of input, really, really useful input about the features they liked, what we should add, how to structure reports, and that kind of thing. So that's sort of the backstory behind the app that we're going to look at now. So now we're looking at this first version of Altmetric for institutions, and the idea is that you can track, monitor, and report on the broader impact of your research output, specifically for your institution, not all institutions, not someone else's institution, just yours. And the key features of this new app are that we can give you summary reporting, which is actually quite handy. You can get a wider view of the actual mentions that the papers in your institution are receiving. You get author identification, which means you can actually drill down into whose papers are getting more attention. You can go into a department and do the same thing, or even a journal subject and do that. Aside from all that, which is sort of more structured around the organization of the institution, the people in the institution, we have custom group editing. So if you actually tend to do a lot of collaborations with other universities, you might want to put the papers that you've worked on together in a custom group and look at the attention that way as well. There are many different options actually for using the custom groups, and I can show you an example in the live demo later. And of course, with all the reports, you can still export everything like you could before in the Altmetric Explorer. And for the first release, we haven't put in PDF exports yet, but that's something we will be working on next. And finally, all users in the institution would be able to access Altmetric for institutions via site license through IP verification. So without further ado, I'll go now into my browser and open up Altmetric for Institutions, which is a web app. So it's already loaded up here. We have it just at altmetric.com/explorer. So it is virtually the same way to get into the Explorer as you would have had before if you were one of the free librarian users. So what you see here, this is fake data for a fictional university called Lilliput. And the first screen is a summary report. So what you have here are actually the counts for mentions. So for Lilliput University, over all time, they've received 2,110 mentions. And these mentions could be pretty much anything. We've got a whole list of sources here. And what you can do is actually toggle between the sources, and the data will change, or sorry, the charts will change to reflect the data source that you happen to be looking at. So before I start toggling through the sources, I'll show you what's on this page at all. The first thing is a chart of the mentions, so you can see the mentions over time. We've never released a feature like this before, so this is quite exciting that you can actually see over a certain time period, over a day, 3 days, a month, or longer, up to any time really, you can see how much attention was received at certain time points. If you go down a bit further, you'll see a map, and this map is based on Twitter users. Before, what we had was actually a way for you to see on an article level where the tweets were coming from. So how this works is anybody who tweets about a paper will look for their profile, and we'll be able to see, okay, they've got a location, and then they've got a description. So with the location, if I said, well, I'm Jean from London, it would put me in the UK. If I tweeted about this paper. So what we've done with this map, it's actually an aggregate map. So of all the papers from Lilliput, these are where the Twitter users are. So 33% of them are in the US, 15% are in the UK, 13% in Japan, and you can mouse over to see the raw numbers for those. At the moment, you can't click in to see exactly which tweets there are, but that is a feature that we're working on in the near future. And then the last component of this summary report is a top articles part. So what you have are actually the top articles ranked by mentions, not by Altmetric score, actually just the total number of mentions. So the first paper here had 179 mentions. You can click to actually view the article itself. The journal title is listed. And if you mouse over this visualization, this is actually a new visualization that we introduced when we worked with Elsevier's Science Direct. It's called the bar. And what it shows you is essentially the same thing as the donut. It is broken up by color. So the yellow, again, is still blogs, blue, tweets. And if you click on that, you'll get to see the details page. So you'll get to read through all the blog posts, all the tweets, all the Facebook posts, see the Altmetric score in context according to the journal article and over time. And then also an individual demographics breakdown for geographical information and actually even tweeter demographics of who is actually tweeting about this particular paper. So all of that information is accessible from the Summary tab. And as I said, you can toggle through and look at the news attention over time and break it down, see what the top articles were in the news, the top articles in blogs, and again, the blogs over time. With Twitter, if you want to dive a little bit more deeply into the Twitter source specifically, and of course, any of these other sources. The next thing you can do is actually, I want to find a specific person or a specific department. You go up to the top and you click Explore My Institution. And what you get is actually a list. So you can either browse through authors, search alphabetically, or type in their name to find someone. You can search for a department. We've only got sample data here, so there aren't loads and loads of departments, but you get the rough idea of how it would work. The departments list the number of authors per affiliation, the number of total articles that they have published, and then the number of articles that have metrics in our database. So essentially what we're doing is we're getting a feed or syncing with a CRIS in an actual university, pulling in that data, and then trying to identify which papers actually correspond with papers we're already tracking attention for. So this column here will match up what you see in the summary report. So if you clicked on Department of Humanities, you'd see 153 articles and their stats in a summary report. And again, the same thing, breakdown by source, a map of Twitter users, and the top articles by mentions table. So going back into Explore My Institution, as I said, authors and departments you can browse through. With journal subjects, this is a bit of an interesting one. So every paper that we have in the database obviously has a journal, and all the journals have subjects associated with them. So these subjects are actually taken from the ERA fields of research subjects, and this is an Australian classification of journal subjects. And the idea behind having this, as opposed to just the department's view, is actually if you have any interdisciplinary collaborations within the university, or if you just are interested in how the university is doing in a particular subject, very narrow subject, this is the area to go. So you can get into quite a lot of detail, like atomic, molecular, nuclear, particle. Actually, this one doesn't seem that detailed, but art theory and criticism, you can find a specific set of articles and do the same thing, get the summary report and all the metrics that way. With custom groups, I mentioned this a little bit earlier when we were still in the PowerPoint, but you can set up a custom list of DOIs or other scholarly identifiers. If you happen to have 1,000 DOIs, which are maybe from your lab group or another lab group, maybe from a different university, you can create a custom group for that. So not all the papers in your groups will necessarily be from your institution. You could even export all these DOIs from Scopus or Web of Science and paste them into a custom group. And again, operates the exact same way. You can generate the summary report. So another aspect that I should show you is a new view for articles. So if you're familiar with the Explorer already, you would have seen we had a different view before. We've added something now. So if you go into, say, Elizabeth Blackburn's report, you've got her summary report here with her 30 articles. And then if you click on this Articles tab, you can actually see which articles are in the set. Usually they'll have an author tag, and when you're browsing around the university, it's helpful to see actually who this author is affiliated with in your institution. The subject tags are all listed here as well. So multidisciplinary comes up whenever you have stuff like nature or PLOS or science that don't have just one journal subject. And you can even click through and read the abstract for some of these papers. Any of them, I think we're scraping from some abstract sources, so there might not be complete abstracts for every paper, but at least you can get a rough idea of what the paper was about if you are an administrator and you don't know. And yeah, so you can actually scroll through and get into a lot more detail on an author by author or department by department basis. The other thing to mention actually is that what you're looking at here in the main view is just mentioned articles from Lilliput University, so articles that have metrics essentially. If you want, you can actually switch back to the original Explorer by clicking Look at All Articles instead. And what this does, you lose the summary tab because it's all other articles in our database, and you can get back to essentially the original Explorer view. And a lot of the same filters are there, so if you wanted to search for a specific journal or for a specific publisher even, and even a specific funder, because we have some funder data right now. Say if you were interested in what was published by Cancer Research UK, you can still do that with the main view of the Explorer when you're searching through all articles. So if you're interested in actually starting a trial of Altmetric for institutions, what you can do is sign up for a trial account with sample data. So that would be actually the Lilliput University account that I've just shown you. You can play around with that. You can try out the custom groups with any DOIs that you already have, and that's completely free. If you want to trial with your institution's data, you can do it on request, and it's free as well. You just have to give us your data in a specific format, which I'll show you. And essentially what would happen is your account with the Explorer would be switched to this new account with your institution's data that you've imported. If you were interested in buying Altmetric for institutions for your university, the pricing is based on research output and also full-time employee count. So every university is priced a little bit differently, and we'll have to discuss it on a case-by-case basis. But the implementation process is fairly easy. If you already have an existing CRIS system like even Symplectic or Pure, it's a lot easier that way. We have good repository support as well, so importing the data and setting everything up is actually not a big deal. We will provide comprehensive post-sales training for all of your staff who would actually use Altmetric for institutions, and the support is given for the US and the UK at this point. And this is the last slide. This is about trialing with your own data. So if you are interested in getting Altmetric for institutions with your own institution's articles, what you need to do is actually give us a publications list. So typically this could be a spreadsheet which has some or all of your institution's articles, preferably more because you'd actually get to see more in the summary report as a result. What you should include are things like your author names. So these are authors that are in your institution only, and any departmental affiliations they have. Of course, you also should help us include a DOI. And so this table here indicates the 3 columns that we would need at minimum. So an author, a department or a group, and a DOI. So if you have a specific hierarchy that your departments sit in, you can submit that to us as well in a spreadsheet. And if you want to get started with this, just email us at support@altmetric.com and we can give you all the details and a really simple getting started guide. So that's all I'm going to say. I think we've got some questions. So my colleague is helping me to collate all of the questions and we'll try and answer them. Should we open up the floor, or do you think?
Should we try and go through the ones that are there?
Okay, let's try and go through the ones that are there first. So the first question
is, how do you know and disambiguate authors and departments?
How do you know and disambiguate authors and departments? Actually, so we don't do the disambiguation ourselves in our database. The reason why we have to sync with a CRIS like Symplectic or Pure or a repository is just to get that publications list. So the university tells us who their authors and departments are, and we simply compare that publications listing with our own, and that's the only way. So we rely on the university giving us the right information, essentially.
Next one is...
The next question is...
someone asked about ORCID, and I said in the next few months.
Okay, so ORCID integration is something that we want to do, and at the moment it is not in Altmetric for institutions, but it is in our roadmap. So what we need to do is decide on what the exact implementation is going to look like. It will probably end up being something like the custom groups, but actually if anybody has ideas of how they would want to see ORCID implemented into Altmetric, now is the stage to do it because we are getting customer feedback.
Next question. Okay, on the keyword searching, is that just article titles and authors, or is that also abstract?
Oh, on keyword searching, is it just author names and article titles, or is it abstracts as well? At the moment, I don't think we are searching abstracts. I'm pretty sure we aren't, but I would have to check with the tech team just to be absolutely sure.
Okay, how often will we update an author list from an institution?
How often will we update an author list from an institution? Ideally, this would be done once per day.
Okay, and then someone has asked, how is it driven from a CRIS on an automatic ongoing basis?
Oh, and the other question is it driven from a CRIS on an ongoing basis? This is really a case-by-case thing, so it depends on how your system is set up and how we've developed a connector into our system. The ideal case is to get new articles once per day, and then we're tracking the attention anyway, so as soon as we get the articles, we'll have the up-to-date counts. It's just getting the articles in, which is the issue, and that would be dependent on exactly how we connect up with the university in the end. Okay, so I'm actually going to open the floor probably to much noise and clamor. So if anyone has additional questions, I'll stay on the line for a little while and mute if I need to answer something big. But thank you so much for listening. Hope you all have a great day. We're about to have an Altmetric for Institutions launch party internally for our small team, and we're very, very proud to be able to bring this product to you. We'd love to hear what you think about it, so please sign up for a free trial. And if you want to try it with your data, email support@altmetric.com. Thanks.
Hello. My name
Hello.
is Lisa, and I am
Hi.
calling from California.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. I am curious about if you have any of the trial folks or libraries that have been involved in the free sharing, if they would be invited to share what they have experienced and how they're actually integrating it with their research groups. I have been asked to investigate various systems for our institution, and this is all new to me. So some of this I completely understood, and other parts, like how the information gets in there, is really key, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if you would have
which
have a
information do you mean?
follow-up. Well, we, of course, are doing research, and they want to know within particular groups, and these are the it involves many, many institutions, not just our institution. We
Mm-hmm.
give out
Mm-hmm.
money for
Okay.
research to other institutions, so we want to see the impact of the work throughout the various groups.
Yeah.
And like right now, we have 10,000 articles that have been put into a database. Unfortunately, they just invited me in, and I said, I noticed you don't have any DOIs here. So they've been doing it without a librarian. But
Okay.
so we'd have to get that added in, of course. So they said, oh, we were wondering what those were. So we are looking at, that's just a small number of years. That's just the last 5 years. So we want to go back to the beginning, where maybe some in the 70s, where the articles wouldn't possibly have DOIs. How do we incorporate those? And then going forward as well.
Right.
And
Yeah.
how and understanding the process.
Yeah, well, we don't always just need DOIs. So if we have a domain and we know where if there's like a not physical,
Citation,
web
a full
record.
citation.
Yes, a full citation. If it has a handle, actually, we can track it too. So I'd probably have to see an example to understand a little bit more clearly. But yeah, it doesn't have to have a DOI. And in terms of the coverage, we are best at tracking things from 2011 and onwards. It's just because most people, weren't on Twitter until, very recently. So the volume of data is increasing. Twitter is by far the most active source. But because we've just added stuff like policy documents, a lot of these are referencing papers that are much older. And we'll probably be able to have better support for the humanities in that sense, where there are more older papers that get cited compared to very, very new research. So I don't know if that really answers your question.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh.
Do you have a forum, a blog space where people, like a user group of your tools, are are chatting and hook up and learn from each other?
We have a knowledge base, but it isn't really a forum per se. I think what we were trying to put together was like an advisory panel, and there are some user groups in the UK that are getting together with Altmetric and Figshare. But we don't have anything on the web as far as I know. There's some chatter on Twitter, definitely, and maybe people you can reach out to there. But I can have a look and see if anyone could provide any feedback to you. If you just want to email me, my email is jean@altmetric.com.
Oh, and also, you have staff, of course, that can answer questions as we come along and see which tools would be best as we're exploring what's available.
Pardon?
You would be able to answer questions yourself about.
Oh yeah, sure, definitely.
Okay, all right. And we are not a university research institution. We're a federal research institution, but we work with universities. Are you limiting to the, because everything I read in the model is more around university? Are you also allowing government?
Yeah. I mean, this is just sort of the major use case, but there isn't any reason why we couldn't basically use it for other purposes as well, or other institutions. And sometimes even funders have worked with us in the past, so with the Explorer actually. So there are a lot of different use cases we can definitely explore.
Yeah, we're sort of a mishmash of all those things. So I find it very, very intriguing and very timely, of course.
Cool.
It's brought me in. Thank you again for your presentation.
No problem.